What is going on, everyone? So in today's video, I'm going to be running through how to set up your client tracking stuff inside of GoHighLevel if you're obviously an online fitness coach. Now, the reason I'm putting this video together is because obviously a lot of online fitness coaches are already using GHL, but they're just not really using it to the full extent that it can be used. Most coaches are just using it basically for their sales side of things. More specifically, I find most coaches basically just are using it like Calendly. Like they just have their like couple calendars in there and have their sales reminders, and that's about it. But the next thing, apart from obviously your sales side of things, the next lowest hanging fruit to set up and GoHighLevel is obviously your client tracking stuff. So this is built really for internally for you to manage your clients, and obviously if you have a team as well, for them to help manage your clients, and just to give your clients a better coaching experience inside of their 12, 16, 24 week journey, and to give them a bit more touch points as well. So I'll keep this video super short and keep it super quick. But obviously we would start off with having a nice client tracking pipeline set up. Obviously all the different pipeline stages are more specific to you and your coaching business. It depends on your minimum terms. Also depends on if you have sub coaches as well. How soon do you onboard a client after they pay? Is it right then and there, or do you start everyone the next following Monday? Stuff like that just does make it quite specific. So this is just to give you a bit of an idea of how it can be structured. But I'll quickly run through how each pipeline stage and how they work. So obviously the sale made pipeline, most of my clients use Newie. So we zap over from Newie when a client pays. Obviously what the zap would look like is if someone pays a one-off purchase, if they're piffing inside of Newie, and then obviously for subscription as well, we would have that zap in there, and then we might just go add them into GHL and directly add them into this pipeline stage here. One thing to note as well, whenever you're zapping over stuff from Newie, is to include the Newie start date, because that is super useful to help track your minimum terms and where they're at. But basically, yeah, once they've paid, it's the same for Stripe as well if you use Stripe or any other payment provider. Once they've paid, obviously they'll get added into here. Delayed start date, this depends on, if you've sold them and they don't start for another 2-3 weeks, they might automatically be moved in here, or it might be a manual one. If basically you've kept their start date the same, but you guys have discussed that their start date will be 2-3 weeks from now. Onboarded, so this looks a bit different for every single business. If you have sub coaches, you might use this to track how quickly your sub coaches are onboarding your clients. So how quickly they're setting up their training, nutrition habits. Training, this obviously just gets pushed into when they've hit their, first week or they've been onboarded. Now they get moved into the training section here. So this just knows, all right, we've got these, 50 plus clients inside of their first 9 weeks. And then we might have a 10-week pipeline stage here, which basically happens once they hit 10 weeks, depending on your minimum term. We might send them out a goals form to be like, hey, you reached 10 weeks, let's go through your goals, review everything. And then a couple of days later, you might say, once they've submitted, obviously, that form, you might send them a calendar link, being like, yo, let's jump on a call, let's chat through everything, see how you're finding everything. Obviously, then you're kind of just going to try and resell them. Obviously, once again, depending on your minimum term, but let's say we've got a 16-week minimum term, so we might try and resell them at 10 weeks. So that's what the kind of automation would look like running in the back end. And then once they hit 16 weeks, obviously it just automatically gets moved inside of here. And then long-term ongoing, once again, this depends on your business and how you structure things. But I find most coaches just have something inside of here that once they've finished their, minimum term, they might be on like a month-by-month, just a month-by-month payment plan. So we might just automatically move them in here. So we know that it's on a month-by-month basis, and then it's 4 weeks notice to cancel. Now, client at risk, this one is super valuable. So this, once again, depends on your business. But if a client drops, for example, below 20% compliance for their training and nutrition, you might automatically trigger them to move inside of here. And then what this client at risk pipeline does is it triggers out an automation on the back end, which actually gives your client more touch points throughout the week. So you might start it off with being like, yo, let me know if you get a training session today, and just kind of encouraging messages like that. And then eventually, depending on if their compliance picks up, at the end of the sequence, you might get them be like, yo, we need to hop on a call. I can tell you've really been struggling. What can we do to keep you on track? So that one is super valuable if you do have clients that kind of drop off at, a certain point. And this is valuable to figure that out as well. So if you don't know, your week where clients are most likely to churn. That's why you'd have something like this inside of here. So you can track their drop off. That, all right, the stats show that at 11 weeks, clients, nutrition drops by 20% across the board. And then so you know that then what you can do is at 11 weeks, you can provide even more value at that point. So you know they're not going to churn. So that's kind of how I'd structure that. Client on pause. Basically, we would just zap this one over from Newie. So basically just zap in if they've paused inside of Newie or Stripe, same kind of thing. And then just add the start pause date and then the end pause date. Requested cancellation. So this is a super valuable one. So what you can do here is you can actually trigger out an automation on the back end to send them a cancellation form. Now, why we would have this cancellation form is to obviously grab as much data as possible to understand, why they're looking to cancel, what you could have done better. Is there anything that you, the coach, can do to keep them on board, etc. And just try and grab as much data as possible, because that data is super valuable. You might then use that inside of your messaging to pre-objection handle before you get in a sales call with someone. Or if they just said, at 12 weeks, X, Y, Z, then you might implement something for every other client that at 12 weeks, they don't have that same, trigger goal that they want to cancel. So that one is super valuable. Cancelled, obviously this is just a cancelled section that gets zapped off inside of Newie as well. So once they actually cancel inside of Newie or Stripe, we just zap that over, and then we just get rid of the active client stuff, and then we add the cancelled client tag. What you then might do as well is add them into a bit of a long-term nurture sequence to try and re-engage them. 3 months later, you might set up an automation where in 3 months we automatically reach out to them, being like, hey, it's been 12 weeks since we last chatted. How's your training and nutrition going? To spark another conversation. Stuff like that. So that's kind of how I would structure the base of a client tracking pipeline. Once again, it is very specific to your fitness coaching business. But the actual automations firing off in the back end should be held inside of a client tracking pipeline folder inside of your automations. These are some of the basic ones here. So the at-risk automation, obviously, once they get moved into the at-risk section, depending on what your conditions are, we can do an internal notification to you or your team, and then they will just start to go through the flow. Now, like I said, with the cancellation form, if they get moved into the cancelled request cancellation section, we might send them the form there, send a notification to the team in Slack, letting them know that this person's requested to cancel, and then we might check in 2 days' time to see if they've actually filled out the form. If they haven't, we might have someone manually reach out. And if they have, obviously it depends what they've submitted inside of that form. And the actual cancelled pipeline section, so obviously once they've moved inside of cancelled here, which is triggered off inside of your actual payment provider, we might just do a notification to the team, remove the active client tag, add a cancelled client tag from there as well. Newie start date. So this is obviously getting them into GHL, getting them moving through the pipeline stages. So obviously you would just set the event start time to the custom field you've created for the Newie start date, add them in there, update them in the pipeline, and then you would add them into the next workflow, which would be more of your client router workflow. So your main workflow to track them throughout their journey. So what this may look like is, setting the event start time, wait 63 days, notification to Slack to the team that they've hit that time frame. You might add a tag saying that they've been sent their week 9 goals form. Then you would update them inside of the pipeline. You might wait another week, send them out a booking link from there, being like, yo, so you filled out your goals form. Let's hop on a call to obviously run through everything you submitted. Obviously, then you can try and resell them on the call as well. But this automation is also built for for coaches that do have a big team. So you can check who the client's actually assigned to, which coach. And then you might just run through, sends them a notification saying this person's booked in a call, or they've filled out their form, or they've hit this time frame. And then you might just update them inside of the pipeline, saying they've hit 16 weeks, and they're just ongoing from now. So once again, this is really, really coach specific, and up to your fitness biz. Obviously, some online coaches have a simpler system than this. Some of them have a far more complex system than this because they have a bigger team, bigger coaches, bigger client amount and whatnot from there. So if you are looking for something kind of built out similar to this, or you just want to have a chat about what you can build out inside of GHL for your fitness coaching business, hit the link down below. I'll have an application form down there. We can just pop through what you're kind of looking for. I can get back to you and basically just say, look, I can help you with that. I might not, whatnot from there. But if you enjoyed this video, please pop a like, and I'll be posting more stuff like this.